Hello and welcome back to the Alex at Bat podcast, where we are taking a time capsule back to 2017. Time travelers that we are. We're going to look at week 13 in 2017, recap some of our games as if it's present day, since we're in 2017. So I know that there was a lot of games going on around the league. Do you want to start us off?
Sure, let's start off with the Cowboys versus Redskins.
Okay. So what happened there?
So it was a 17-38 win. So it's Dak Prescott. He had 102 passing yards with 11 completions with 22 attempts.
38-14, beat the Redskins. It looked like it was a very dominant second and fourth quarter by the Cowboys, scoring 17 points in the second, 21 points in the fourth. And I guess it's worth noting, Washington also scored in those, but couldn't come up with anything more than a touchdown in each. So the first and third quarter were scoreless, actually, for both sides. And then the second and fourth were when the points started to come in, just more on the Cowboys side, obviously. So what were some of your takeaways from the game? I mean, I see Dak Prescott was 11 for 22, throwing for 102 yards, which isn't actually all that much. Looks like more of a running game this game. He did throw for 2 touchdowns, so that's worth noting. And Kirk Cousins threw for 2 touchdowns as well, but obviously their running game wasn't up to where Dallas's was. Is that as a result of Ezekiel Elliott?
I think that this week, since they've lost 3 games in a row, and I know that it was because of the lack of running game, not getting the running game going without Ezekiel Elliott, but I think this game, they said they need to focus more on the running game. They need to get back to their old ways. So I think they did just that with not Ezekiel Elliott, but with Alfred Morris and Rod Smith. They were able to get to their running game and was really dominant with the running game as well, which was more good to see. I think they got Des Bryant a little bit more involved with this game.
Yeah.
And he actually, I think he passed Bob Hayes for the most touchdowns in Cowboys history. But yeah, I think they just found a good way to get Des Bryant involved in the game. I think that the other hand is that they weren't able to get their other receivers in the game because their second Williams.
I mean, it was only 2 receptions for 21 yards, so it was like 10.5. Which, I mean, you're right. Des Bryant was the leader in yards there. I think he was averaging over 16. It looks like, or no, I'm sorry, over 12. But he had 61 total yards, which dwarfed the next guy, which was Williams at 21 yards. So he was doing the lion's share of the receiving yards.
Absolutely. I think that they definitely found a way. I think they just need to get their other receivers more involved in the passing game, obviously. I think it was good that they were able to get Des Bryant in the game because he last week only had like 3 receptions, I think, for 31 or 38 yards. And it was really shut out for sure with that tough Chargers defense. And I think now they looked at it and say, hey, Josh Norman, he's not probably going to match up with Des Bryant a lot. We got to take advantage of their other corners because they've given up a lot of big plays. They're not known to be that, like that lockdown corner. And I think they just did that. Every single reception he had, it was a big play. And I think with the running game, I think it was Morris, man. He had over
27 carries, 127 yards, and an average of 4.9 yards a carry. I mean, it's not astronomical. It's not, Hall of Fame caliber necessarily, but that's a workhorse. Anybody that can pick up 5 yards every time they touch the ball, I mean, that's not nothing, right?
Absolutely. And I think too on the defensive side,
and a touchdown. Sorry.
And on the defensive side for the Cowboys too was their linebackers were making a lot of tackles. Their leader in tackles was Anthony Hitchens with 15 tackles. I think without Sean Lee, they don't make a lot of tackles.
Interception by Heath
and Anthony Brown. They haven't been making a lot of tackles without Sean Lee. I think finally once they started to notice, hey, we got to step up on defense. We can't use the same old way saying, oh yeah, no linebacker. We're going to struggle in defense. But I think they finally rose to an occasion. 15 tackles, their leader. I think second was Kevon Frazier with 6 tackles. And it was really impressive how their defense was finally able to put pressure on their quarterback. And they had 4 sacks. It was the first time they had a sack since the Week 10 game against Atlanta. So that was about almost 3 weeks ago. So yeah, I think they found a way to get pressure on the quarterback, and when you do that in the NFL, man, you're going to win a lot of games by putting pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, it's funny. Lawrence saved most of his stats for the sack category. He did have 4 tackles, but at that, again, that doesn't really compare to Hitchens and Frazier. Although, as far as impacting the game by taking down the shot caller, the quarterback, Lawrence came through with two solid sacks.
Absolutely, and it was big plays at big moments too in that game.
Nice.
I've really been impressed with how the Cowboys defense was finally able to step up without Sean Lee, because I think they just need to do that. And next week it looks like Sean Lee might be coming back too, so they'll definitely bring an extra boost to their defense, and wonder how they're going to do against a depleted Giants team. I know that they're talking about I know they just benched Eli Manning for Geno Smith, which we're going to get on to next.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think if Geno Smith is a starting quarterback, man, they might have another field day on defense,
Nice.
just like they did this week. So we'll see how that goes. And we're going to move on to Eli Manning getting benched. It was the first time since December 21st of 1997 when there was a guy without the name Manning playing in an NFL game. And the last time Eli Manning did not start a football game was November 14th, 2004.
Wow.
For a guy named Tony. I forget his last name.
Romo? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no. But yeah, it was the first time he's had a big snap streak that just got snapped. I think he's had like over 200 consecutive games played, I think. And that streak has come to an end for Eli Manning.
I mean, that has to rank up there as far as...
Yeah, I think Brett Favre has more.
Yeah, he has the CTA to prove it, so...
Yeah, so I definitely think that, but he's definitely he's up there though. He's probably, I would say, in the top 5 for most consecutive starts. And I think the problem with the Giants is, the way how they've been playing all year. Their offensive line is not good. They don't have any good receivers. Since Odell Beckham's out for the year, Brandon Marshall out for the year. Their real main playmakers, Evan Engram, their tight end from Ole Miss.
Yeah, he led the
he
team
almost had a 100-yard game yesterday.
Yeah, 99 yards. Yeah. He came in 99 yards on 7 receptions, so he was and a touchdown. So he was definitely one of the big names there. I mean, I'm looking at the other receiving yards. The next guy is Shepard at 3 receptions for 56 yards. More of an average, but still less yardage altogether.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say Geno Smith played terrible. He had a 212 yards passing, but I mean, it could have been better. But
no interceptions.
No interceptions, but it's definitely a good thing. But I definitely think it's hard playing with that offensive line in front of you with not a lot of receivers besides the tight end who's from Ole Miss, and he's just a rookie too.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get that much production out of these players, and I think that...
And they weren't rushing. No rushing yards. I mean, on the other side of the ball, you had the Raiders with Lynch running 101 yards for an average of 5.9, which that's pretty impressive, and a touchdown to boot.
And his first 100-yard game as a Oakland Raider, and it just proves how much they haven't been using the running game as much as the Raiders should be. I think that their struggles are definitely showing for sure. I think Derek Carr, he didn't play bad, obviously, but...
No, I mean, and he only... Eli threw for the touchdown, Smith threw for the touchdown, and Carr only had 1 passing touchdown. But the difference was few more passing yards, 287 for Carr. I think it was 212 for Smith. But then I think statistically, I'm looking at the difference, and what I'm seeing is Marshawn Lynch, plus a couple field goals.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes.
Yeah, so I would say a couple field goals too.
A couple field goals. Lynch rushing for his first 100-yard game as a Raider. And, yeah, there you have it.
Absolutely. And I think that the thing that the Giants need to do in the offseason is I would recommend, if I were them, is definitely finding a quarterback, because Eli Manning is getting older. He's in year 14. And, you need to find a franchise quarterback for sure, because Eli Manning is just not the answer anymore. He's old, he's done so much for this franchise, obviously, with the 2 Super Bowls and beating one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in Eli Manning. But I think that, we've all seen, he's not, I don't know what you should do. Would you say, bench him for the rest of the year because, how bad the offensive line is, or or bring that other guy, Davis Webb, in, who's been inactive like every single game, and try to give him a shot and see what the Giants have in their future quarterbacks.
Yeah,
Eli Manning.
I mean, at 2-10, I think the Giants should play around and start moving towards a plan that's based around future, as opposed to what's the right thing necessarily to do this year. I mean, if they were 10-2, obviously they're keeping Manning in the spot, even though it is year 14, and even though they do have to eventually start thinking about the future, they wouldn't have to start thinking as much right now. But at 2-10, Eli's out of the game, Smith's in. Yeah, bring some other guys in that have been inactive, try them out, see how they do. I mean, I would literally just go down, kind of work my way back down the ladder. Like, okay, Smith gets his shot for a couple games, see how he does. And then we bring in Webb. That's the other guy.
Davis Webb is
right. So Davis Webb,
a healthy scratch like every game too.
Right. So give those guys a shot. Start looking at your future. See, at the very least, you're going to walk out of the season with some knowledge of either what you have to do or some knowledge of what's not going to work. That's it.
Absolutely, and I think that the receivers definitely has been a big issue. They don't really have like a number one receiver since Odell Beckham's been out, and I know that obviously the Raiders aren't good at they're not as good as they were last year. Making it to the playoffs. I know Derek Carr got injured, but I just think ever since that injury last year, like he's never been the same.
Right, and they are 6-6, and they got to win heading into next week. I don't know who they play next week.
They play the Chiefs.
The Chiefs.
High-powered offense with Alex Smith, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce.
Yeah, that might be a little bit of a problem. But see how they stack up against those guys, and if they come out with the win, then it's not like their season's not salvageable. They can still make a run for a wild card.
Absolutely, and I think that defense too. I felt like a little bit yesterday. Just I think the lack of effort too. I think once you have a struggling offense, you kind of start to deplete too. You start to not make a lot of big plays on defense anymore. I think that's part of the reason why the defense struggled a lot last night with containing Marshawn Lynch and stuff like that. I think that's
going to be a problem for any defense. Though.
Yeah, but I definitely think that's going to be a problem with any defense. But I was just saying, I think that when a team's offense is playing as bad as the Giants are, I think that the defense tries to back them up, but after a while, it's just hard to do so.
Yeah, and that I mean that comes down to the human element of the game, where if the defense is trying everything they can to keep those guys in the game, and when the offense walks out on the field, they're not delivering on that. I mean, that can be demoralizing to both sides of the football, the defense and the offense. So, yeah, at 2-10, I mean, nobody on that team is realistically looking at necessarily what are we doing this year. I mean, they're going in. I know they got to focus on the game and try to get the best out of everybody for each game, but it sounds like it's a future, or it's a forward-looking team at this point.
Yeah, I think they're just looking into the future, see what they can have. I think that starts next week with the Cowboys. I think everyone has a good feeling that the Cowboys are going to win this game regardless. So give Davis Webb a shot out there. See how he does against the Cowboys defense. Give other players a shot on defense too. Like, it just doesn't hurt at this point. This is just an evaluation period.
Right.
Like, they're in that stage. This is not like
tryouts.
It's pretty much tryouts. It's not a stage where you're trying to fight for wins or anymore. It's just let's see what we got. We want to win the game. That's never going to change. But let's just see what we have in these younger players. See, look, David Webb's, how we can, how he's a leader, how he brings guys in and out of the huddle, how he cheers his teammates on and stuff like that throughout the game. And I think that handles pressure too, and see how he can do with that. And I think that we've all known Eli Manning can do that because he's won 2 Super Bowls. We pretty much know what he is by now in this point in his career. Davis Webb, we have no idea. He hasn't been playing. So I think you should just give him a shot. It just doesn't hurt for the Giants. And next up, we have a rough game by the Denver Broncos, losing to the Dolphins 9-35. And man, that was a rough one. Trevor Siemian threw 3 interceptions. He went 19 for 41 with 200 passing yards. he had a hard time connecting with his receivers. Dolphins finally looked explosive. And this was like the first time that we've seen the Dolphins defense create a lot of turnovers in just one game. I think they forced a couple on defense and then also on special teams too. And special teams been a big problem with Denver all year this year. And I think that the Broncos defense is probably one of the toughest on that team. What's your take on this?
Well, I'm looking. You got Jay Cutler going for 235 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a couple interceptions in there. Rushing wise, Drake 120 yards. I mean, that's one of the bigger totals that we've seen. 5.2 yards per carry. So obviously some offensive weapons. You got Stills in the receiving, scored a touchdown. 19.6 average per reception. I mean, that's the only guy with better was a 29-yard reception by Fasano, but that was his only reception of the day. So they obviously got some high-powered weapons. Cutler was firing on all cylinders. You had the rush by Drake, the receptions by Stills, so added up to a powerful 35-point total to blow out the Broncos.
I think that the problem with the Broncos is the offense for sure. Denver's defense had 3 turnovers yesterday, right?
Right.
And they still lost 35.
And Simeon's, the 3 interceptions by Trevor Simeon. I mean, that's going to hurt any team.
I think with the Broncos right now,
19 for 41.
This is not an NFL offense on any level. You don't have an NFL quarterback.
No.
You don't have an NFL running back. You don't have an NFL receiver. So, I mean, Demaryius Thomas is a great player. Emmanuel Sanders is a great player, but you just don't have the playmakers on offense like you used to with, Peyton Manning. Like, when Peyton Manning was a quarterback for the Broncos, like, he could get you, if there was a time in the game where, you're losing by a lot, Peyton Manning could just come back and just win the game, right?
Right.
You don't have that quarterback right now. And I think that the Broncos are starting to see that they don't have that quarterback. Like if we're down by a lot, we're still in this game. They don't have that quarterback right now. Trevor Simeon is not, I would say, he's not the answer for the Broncos offense. He struggled a lot. Denver's defense had 3 turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
Still lost the game 35-9. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. Like, teams who force 3 turnovers don't lose that badly.
Right.
And
C.J. Anderson, running back. Yeah, I mean, he had the most rushing yards on the Broncos at 67, and he led for receptions as well.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you talk about throwing the burden on one guy. I understand if the coaches are watching Simeon and he's throwing interceptions, they're going to want to have it on the ground, or if not handing off to C.J. Anderson, just throwing a quick route to him in the pocket. So it's just a shame that he had to carry the burden, and he just that was really the only guy producing for them yesterday.
I really think that too, and I think that the problem was throwing so many interceptions. They were just throwing check down passes to C.J. Anderson, and the second leading receiver in that game was Jamal Charles.
Mm-hmm.
I think their third or second string running back.
Okay,
and that just proves how much that obviously the coaching staff, from my point of view, it looks like the coaching staff doesn't trust Trevor Simeon as much as they do. I mean, like, if you're throwing checked out passes and stuff like that, like, Peyton Manning was probably never doing that. He's probably throwing deep balls like all the time in his prime. And, because I also think too, the reason that he was doing that was because the Broncos coaching staff trusted that he would make the play. Mm-hmm. They don't trust Trevor Simeon in making those plays. That's why they're telling him, look, just throw check down passes to your running back. See what he can do, because you're not throwing it long, because there's a good chance you might throw an interception. And there was one play. It was intended for Demaryius Thomas, right? So it was a play where you have to get out to the sideline. I think it was an out route he ran to the sideline. You got to get this ball right on the sideline. He threw it 2 yards behind Demaryius Thomas.
Right.
Instead of throwing it to the sideline, got interception for a pick 6.
Wow.
And that's been a problem with Trevor Simeon, is him making the bad throws and underthrowing his receivers. And I think that
it just sounds like a pileup of bad decisions.
Yeah, it's just bad decisions, and decision making too, like making decisions at the right time. Like you gotta throw it like when on those out routes, you gotta throw it laser to the sideline where he can get it. At worst, it's an incompletion if he drops it or you overthrow it a little bit, out of bounds. But
right.
he's, I think that's the problem is his lack of chemistry with his receivers. I feel like this is kind of the same situation that Dez Bryant and Dak Prescott's been in all year too, is not getting the chemistry down with the receivers. I think Emmanuel Sanders is probably one of their best playmakers, and I'm going to only say the reason he is their best playmaker is because he's fast. I think that Emmanuel Sanders has struggled a lot in this offense too. He doesn't look right. He's had some good games this year, but he just doesn't look right.
It shows the importance of the quarterback and that position. Just if you don't have somebody solid back there, everything else breaks down, and nobody else is going to be able to play at their best.
Absolutely. And I think the problem, too, with what John Elway's done in the offseason, too, is, when you're picking the players, you got to deal with the consequences when they're not producing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the problem is with what John Elway tried to do last year was, look, we have a great defense with Von Miller, 3 great corners, good safeties, good linebackers. We're just going to make it work until we find a quarterback.
Yeah.
But except the quarterback's turning over like it's his job.
Right.
And that's why they can't win games. You can't, literally, you could have one of the best defenses in the NFL. But if you're turning the ball over like it's your job, you're not going to win a lot.
Right.
And I think that they tried to say, look, well, we'll make it work this year. But they tried it last year. They were 9-7 and had a good win streak. And then all of a sudden they were losing. I think they lost 5 in a row or something.
Towards the end?
Towards the end, yeah. Because they didn't have the quarterback that could take them out of a large lead or anything like that. They didn't have the Peyton Manning quarterback when they won that Super Bowl 2 years ago. So what's your take on the special teams? So I know the Broncos defense is probably one of their best units on that team. And you have the Isaiah McKenzie. I think he fumbled the ball 2 times, one resulting in a safety. And I can't remember what the other one was, but he's constantly struggled as the punt returner out of Georgia. He's a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, if you're of the mind that special teams can't win games, I mean, that's wrong because we've seen it happen over and over again. I mean, those guys, even though they might play or represent a small fraction of the playing time, the game can be won or lost in the margins. So, yeah, I think it's incredibly important that they're not producing those turnovers and safeties and things like that, because obviously it does a couple things. It either takes points off your side of the board or puts points onto your opponent's side of the board when you make those type of mistakes. Also, those type of mistakes with the fluctuation of that scoreboard plays into the overall mentality of the defense, the offense, because the defense is looking at it like we got to go in there and play that much harder to pick up the slack for the mistake that was just made. The offense is thinking the same thing. And when those two sides are already struggling, you layer in that third element of special teams issues. Yeah, it's going to be a rough remainder of the year.
And it shows too how bad that offense is. The point where, look, the NFL, when they play offenses, right? The opposing offenses for the team. Look, they say, look, we're going to have the most, conservative, lackluster game plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not going to let Von Miller put pressure on the quarterback. We're not going to let him, make a lot of plays out there. We're going to have the most, probably one of the worst game plans, and we're still going to be just fine. I think the Broncos defense at this point in the season is looking at themselves like, look, if we give up a touchdown, we're losing this game. We lost.
Right.
We're not winning after that.
Yeah.
So I think
their backs are against the wall.
And I think that's definitely the big problem with the defenses because they know the offense is not going to score touchdowns.
Right.
There's no other way to put it. So I think that the defense is like, look, we gotta play it safe. We can't have any blown coverages. We can't go out there and play hardest. We just gotta play safe, and maybe hopefully we can win the game. But I think that they're just in a lackluster. I think the offense is starting to notice that too. Is we're gonna have the most. We're gonna have vanilla
at 3-9. Yeah, they know.
Yeah, they know. Look, we're gonna have the most vanilla game plan this game. We're gonna be fine though. And like if you have a good team, right? Like the Philadelphia Eagles this year, no one goes in the NFL looking like, look, if we play the Eagles, we can't have the most vanilla game plan. We gotta have one of the best game plans of our season.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to creative play calling too, and that goes into Peterson and his crew. I mean, you literally never know what they're going to do. Some of their trick plays and stuff like that. So I don't think that the Broncos really have the luxury of that right now. Or perhaps they do at 3-9. Again, you're in a giant situation where you start to say to yourself, okay, well, let's just try new things. Whether that is new people at new positions, calling people up from the practice squad or whatever, or getting inactive players out there to see, start looking towards the future, or at least looking towards different combinations that might ultimately lead to, less of a blowout than a 35-7 rout by the Dolphins.
35-9, but still,
35-9.
That's still pretty bad.
Yeah, it's bad news, and especially when you say you have a defense that's so good and so willing and so capable, but one that is literally going to have to be the greatest NFL defense of all time, and not by a close margin either, if they expect the defense to pull out victories, because that's ultimately, when you have no offense, you're relying on that defense. And I mean, that's not only the heaviest lift of all time, it's obviously unreasonable. Next game.
So next game we wanted to talk about was Lions versus Ravens.
Okay.
That was definitely a big game for the Ravens. They finally
44 points. Yeah, I'd say so.
They finally found their groove in their offense.
17 in the second quarter.
Yeah, they found their groove in their offense.
24 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where the big money came in.
Absolutely, and I think that Joe Flacco had good chemistry with his receivers. We had Mike Wallace had 5 receptions, 116 yards. I think he looked a lot better this week. He kind of started to look himself back in his prime, and back in that 2012 year. I started to look like that a little bit with that team. And for the Lions, I think there's a lot of concern. Offensive line, for sure.
Offensive line. I was going to say Stafford had more passing yards passing yards than Flacco did. 24 for 29. I mean, Stafford was amazing, aside from maybe the one interception.
Absolutely. And I know he got injured late fourth quarter.
Yeah, it looked like he was out.
Jake Rudock is his name. His first pass in the NFL was to the Ravens defense.
Oh, yeah.
Intercepted.
Rudock.
Yeah, and I think the holes are showing for the Lions is the lack of running game and the offensive line. You're not gonna. I think they're gonna have a hard time making the playoffs with that play from the running game, because you're not gonna win a lot of games passing the ball all game.
Yeah, to Jones. Jones looked like the primary receiver. Close to 23 yards per reception. So he was getting in work. He only came up, I guess, total yards was 90, but that looks like their primary offensive weapon in this game anyway. Not much rushing going on. 50 yards by Green, 4.6 yards a carry. So solid, but he wasn't being utilized. 11 carries. So, it looks like they're relying on one. You got your quarterback and you got your receiver, and that's pretty much it. And you mentioned the O-line; it's kind of weak, right, on the Lions. So you're not gonna get those running backs through that line if they're not opening up the holes and doing what they got to do to provide protection for the running backs coming out of the backfield. And that forces you to throw, which Stafford did successfully most of the time, like we said, except for that one interception. But when your primary target is one guy, then it limits your options.
Yes, and I think with Terrell Suggs too is that he knew that offensive line was weak and he didn't have a bad game. I think he had a sack or two that game, and I think that when you're playing against a Ravens pass rush with Matt Judon, Terrell Suggs, Willie Henry, and so on and so forth, you're not going to win a game with just passing the ball. You're going to have to use the running game. And the Lions are just not good at running the ball. And if you want to go far in the playoffs, right, you're going to have to run the ball. Because there's going to be teams that are, have good corners, good safeties, that you're not going to be able to throw to your receivers every single play. You're going to have to use the running game. And they can't use the running game. I think the last time, like we said last week, was they haven't had a 100-yard rusher, I think, since 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a while, and I think that the lack of running game is something they need to address sooner or later if they want to go far in the playoffs.
I like too the spread of the Ravens defense. If you look down the stat line, if they were all contributing, like everybody had like 3 guys with 5 tackles, 3 guys with 3 tackles, 4 guys with 5 guys with 2 tackles. So everybody was getting their hand on somebody in a Detroit Lions uniform, which is impressive. I mean, it shows a well-rounded defense where everybody's capable. You didn't have necessarily a situation like I can't remember which game we were talking about. I think it was the Raiders with the guy with 12 tackles or 15 tackles. But so
Cowboys.
Cowboys, that's what it was. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that obviously is a recipe for success, especially when you have a caliber quarterback like Stafford.
Absolutely, and I think the Ravens, though, they finally got their groove on offense back that we've all been waiting to see this whole year. I mean, they've definitely gotten lucky a lot this year, with the games they've won, but Flacco looked pretty comfortable out there. He looked good under pressure. This is probably the best game we've seen out of him all year. I think this is the most passing yards he's had in the game, too.
Yeah, they both came in at 6-5, so
playoffs are.
I understand. Yeah, playoffs are on the line, and it's kind of a must-win game for both sides. And I know the schedules might have been very different, so the records, but the records were the same. So you had 2 similar quality caliber teams, and one showed, at least on that day, that they were heads above the other, which was obviously the Ravens.
Absolutely, and they still stepped up when their number was called. Marlon Humphrey, he gave up a couple big plays after Jimmy Smith had some injury. I forget what it was, but it looks like, and he has a 4-game suspension, I think, too.
Ouch.
For a failed drug test, I believe.
Okay.
So even if he was healthy, I don't think he would be playing these last 4 games regardless. So I think Marlon Humphrey, when his number was called, he gave up, like I said, a couple big plays, but towards the end of the game, he had that huge interception that was definitely needed, and that kind of definitely put it into the game. And I think that was the play that Stafford got hurt too. And then I think that Marlon Humphrey is definitely a good, caliber player, and I think that now we get to really see, because he's playing slot corner, but now since he's the number 2 corner, it looks like they're going to play him. We'll really get to see how good he is and how much he is good against, especially next week with the Steelers, with Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Martavis Bryant, because, they do got some good receivers, and see how he does against a good Steelers offense next week, too. So This is another good player. We'll get to really see how good he is. And the next game we want to talk about was Eagles versus Seahawks.
Okay.
Eagles lost this one 24-10.
Okay.
Carson Wentz didn't look bad. Actually, it looked pretty good, but just didn't make the plays when they were needed to be made on the Eagles offense. And the defense struggled a little bit out there. Russell Wilson, they did all right containing him, but could have been a lot better by the Eagles defense. Just, made that 2 touchdowns towards the end for the Seahawks definitely lowered their chances of winning this game. Oh.
Yeah, it looks to me, at least, like Wentz threw for 348 yards. Wasn't superb as far as his completions, 29 out of 45 with an interception, 1 passing touchdown though. So yeah, I mean, it looks like they were trying to go pass. Yeah, I'm looking at the stats. The rushing was pretty much non-existent. You had 3 guys that were all within 30 yards rushing. And so it wasn't even I don't think they combined for 100 yards rushing.
Yeah, and I think
for all 4 of their backs. And when you look at receiving yards, 1 guy stands out, Aguilar. But other than that, it looked like they were trying to go pass heavy, a lot of receptions, but I guess their running game just wasn't working, or they were getting a big pass rush by the Seahawks.
I think the problem too is for the Eagles that they did not do a good job of taking advantage of the Seahawks' lack of stopping the run. They don't, they haven't been stopping the run good at all.
Seahawks haven't?
Yeah, they haven't been good at stopping the run at all, and I don't think they did a good job taking advantage of that. And I think that, and they definitely don't have a good secondary. I know they've lost Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor out for the year. And I think their secondary is a little bit depleted, so I think they did a good job on that, but they should have used the running game a little bit more if you want to win this game. And Russell Wilson looked pretty good out there, making some deep throws. He's known for that deep throws he's always making. And he made a lot of them yesterday too, which was really impressive to see.
Cool.
And and I think that I also know too, since the Eagles are really good this year, I know now they've lost 2 games, but I think every good team is going to have this, bad games or something like that, games where they look a little bit lackluster, kind of like a little bit sluggish.
Yeah.
But I think that Carson Wentz is going to pick it up against the Los Angeles Rams next week, and I think that offense is going to be a little bit better. I think that you need to have these moments if you want,
reality checks.
Have these reality checks, realizing like, hey, we can't play like this. We played 3 bad teams in a row. But now we've played a good team with a good quarterback. Now we have to step it up and move to the Rams with Jared Goff and that high-powered offense with Todd Gurley and Cooper Kupp and so on and so forth. So I think this is definitely a big reality check, and I wonder how they're going to respond with next game, because that's definitely going to be a good matchup.
Yes, sir.
On the air. Eagles versus Rams, one of the best offenses in the NFL. I think the last time they've had that was like in the 1970s, like 2 number 1 offenses in the NFL playing against each other. So that will definitely be a good game. I think they'll really get to see, are they really for real? Are they, just kind of like, they can just be good at beating up on bad teams. So we'll really get to see that next week. Any other thing you got to say about this game?
No, I was just noticing in the stat lines that I think one of the big differences was obviously the Seahawks defense. They were just getting their hands on many more players, a lot more tackles. The one bright spot I think on the Eagles side there was Brandon Graham with a sack and a half. But
yeah, and the defense,
the rest of them kind of got to pull their weight a little bit better.
Absolutely, I think the defense too kind of showed their reality check. Like, look. Now we played a team with a good quarterback.
Right, yeah.
And we're not playing a team with, even though Dak Prescott isn't a bad quarterback. I know they beat up him a couple weeks ago, 9-37 win. But
he's not winning Super Bowls yet.
Yeah, he's not winning Super Bowls. I think, too, is that, he had lost a lot of his key players. And I know that we've seen this year with Dak Prescott, he's not good under pressure and stuff like that, too. So I think now they really had a reality check on defense, too. Like, look, we're playing a for-real quarterback. Russell Wilson is a good quarterback. He throws the ball deep, and the cornerbacks have struggled on those deep balls this year a lot, too. So I think that they've really kind of got a little bit exposed tonight. But I think they'll definitely be a lot better. I think they'll move on for next week. And next week we'll find out if they're a good team, if they're a Super Bowl team. We'll really find out next week.
We're going to see.
We're really going to see. And next game is Bengals versus Seahawks. Ryan Shazier out for the year with a spinal cord injury. Might be out for his career. But that was prayers for him. 17-0 lead from the Bengals until the second half. Ben Roethlisberger and that offense started to come back with Le'Veon Bell. He had over 100 yards. Antonio Brown had over 100 yards. I think they found a way to get a lot. Le'Veon Bell had a lot of big plays out there, and it was definitely a good way how to respond from that 17-0 lead by the Steelers, or not by the they were losing 17-0 and came back and won the game by a field goal.
Yep. And Antonio Brown, second to Le'Veon Bell in receiving yards, scored a touchdown. So yeah, and dominant performance by Roethlisberger. The only kind of issue was an interception, but that was it.
Yeah, and I think that Andy Dalton.
They just came out better in the second half.
Yeah, they just played better in the second half. Andy Dalton didn't have a bad game, but it was just that they just came better back in the second half, and I think that they came out mad too because after that big injury from one of their linebackers, so I think that they just played a lot better. Yep. There's really no other way to put it. And I think that the definite concern is for Andy Dalton is how is he going to be able to hold his lead? How is he going to be able to keep his team in games, and how is he going to be able to pull out wins and stuff like that? So that's definitely a concern for Andy Dalton. He's had struggled. Even looking back at the Green Bay game, he had a big lead, and Aaron Rodgers, came back, but I think that the lack of playmakers they have, because I think they're really only big playmakers, AJ Green. That's about it. Everyone else isn't really like the playmaker on that team. So I think that for sure the lack of playmakers is holding the Bengals back for sure. And we've been finding that out all year too. Like the lack of playmakers is holding them back for sure. And I think that's definitely something they need to address during the offseason is get more playmakers, for the receivers and stuff like that. Get more playmaker receivers. So yeah, I think that's really much it for that game. Definitely a big suspension. Looks like Juju Smith-Schuster had this violent hit. He got ejected, so we'll see if he's able to play in the Ravens and Steelers game. And then Vontaze Burfict. I think it was the hit on Vontaze Burfict. And yeah, they're all good players and everything, so we'll definitely see how that goes down. Anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think that about wraps it up, right?
Yes, I think that's it. So we will see you for Week 14 in the NFL. We got some good matchups, Eagles versus Rams, and Ravens versus Steelers, and many more. Can't wait to discuss it.
See you soon.
Goodbye.
All the we go.